Okay, in this video we're going to continue to solve quadratic equations by factoring. Difference here is we're going to focus more on problems that have GCFs in them. So just a reminder from the last video, the zero product property is what tells us that if we multiply two things together and we get zero, that each one or one of each of them has to be zero. So 4 steps. First step, make sure the equation is equal to 0. Always do this first before you even check for a GCF. Then factor out a GCF. Then use your X or AC split method. Sometimes you can't do that, most of the time you can. And then solve using the zero product property. So let's go ahead and do this. First problem here. Okay. Check to see if there's a GCF first. So in this first problem, can I divide k squared, 7k, and 6 by anything? I cannot. So since I cannot take a GCF out, and it's already equal to 0, I'm going to go ahead and make my x. 6 goes on the top, negative 7 goes on the bottom. So my two numbers that multiply to give me 6 add up to negative 7 are negative 6 and negative 1. Since there is nothing out front here, I don't need to go through the AC split process. I can go right to my parentheses. So that means I have in my parentheses k minus 6 and k minus 1. Okay, don't forget that when it says solve, that means you need to take this a step further and do k minus 6 equals 0, k minus 1 equals 0. So if I add 6 to both sides, my first answer is 6. If I add 1 to both sides, my second answer is 1. Okay, so it's the same thing we did in the last video. Just make sure you check for your GCF before you actually factor. Okay, second problem. First step, make sure it's equal to 0. Already is. Second step, can you divide each of those by anything? Notice I can divide all of those by 4. So if I do that, I'm left with v squared minus 6v minus 16 equals 0. I actually divided everything by 4. Now, if there's nothing out front, when I make my x, the negative 16 goes on top, the negative 6 on bottom. So two numbers that multiply to give me negative 16 and add up to negative 6 are negative 8 and 2. Now, when you're deciding if you need to use AC split or not, go back to this part. Don't go back to the original, go back to this part. If there's nothing out front there, you can go right to your parentheses. So we have v minus 8 and v plus 2. If there's something out front, then you need to do AC split. Okay, set each part equal to 0. And solve. So add 8 to both sides to get 8. Subtract 2 from both sides to get negative 2. And you have both of your answers. Okay, so always check to see if it's equal to 0 first, then check for a GCF, and then if those are both done or you don't need to do them, go ahead and factor. Let's go ahead and try 2 more. Notice that both of these are already equal to 0, so you are going to go ahead and start with checking for GCF. What goes into 8, 12, and 36? Again, I can divide by 4. So if I do that, I have 2n squared minus 3n minus 9 equals 0. Go ahead and make my x. Since there's a number up front, I need to remember to multiply. 2 times negative 9 is negative 18. So I need negative 18 on top. That negative 3 goes on bottom. So the two numbers that multiply to give me negative 18 and add up to negative 3 are negative 6 and 3. Since there is a number out front here, we need to do AC split. So I have 2n squared. Then we use my negative 6 and my positive 3 that I just found here, and my minus 9. We're going to go ahead and make 2 groups and factor by grouping. So I can divide 2 and 6 both by 2. Take my n out. I'm left with n minus 3. I can divide 3 and 9 by 3. So I get n minus 3. If these two groups match, we're in pretty good shape. We have n minus 3 in one group, and then 2n plus 3 in the second group. 3. And then remember, the directions say solve, so we can't stop there. We have to keep going. So n plus 3 equals, sorry about that, n minus 3 equals and 2n plus 3 equals. So if I add 3 to both sides, I get n equals 3. If I subtract 3 from both sides, I get 2n equals negative 3. Divide by 2, and I get two answers. I get n equals 3 and negative 3/2. Okay. So a little bit longer process to get those answers, but we do have our two answers there. Last one on this page. First step, make sure it's equal to 0. Okay, we have an equal 0 there. Second step, look for GCF. Notice this problem only has two terms, but they both have an a. So I'm going to take an a out, which leaves me with 3a plus 5. Once I've done that, since I don't have an a squared, I can't do my x anymore. I need to just go ahead and set each part equal to 0. So I have a equals 0, and 3a plus 5 equals 0. Can't solve the first one. Let's go ahead and solve the second one. So 3a plus 5, I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. And I'm going to divide by 3 on both sides. There's a bad spot on my board there. So I get 0 and negative 5/3. Okay, go ahead and try some practice problems and have those checked out. Make sure you understand those. And then we're going to go on to a couple more. So, last example. In our first step, and this is the step that most students tend to forget, we need to make sure that we have equals 0. And notice in this first problem here, we have equals negative 5. I need to take care of that, so I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to do plus 5 on both sides, because I have to have a 0 over there. So I get k squared plus 3k. Negative 15 plus 5 is negative 10. That equals 0. Make sure when you're doing this, you combine your like terms. Don't try to add 5 to something that you can't add it to. Now that it equals 0, we're going to check to see if we can divide by GCF. So k squared, 3k, negative 10. Can't divide anything out. I'm going to go right to my x. So for my x, since there's nothing out front, I have a negative 10 on top and a positive 3 on bottom. So the two numbers that multiply to give me negative 10 to a positive 3 are 5 and negative 2. Since there's nothing out front, out here, we're going to go ahead and go right to our parentheses. So I have k plus 5, my positive 5, and k minus 2. And then remember the directions say to solve, so we need to go one step further. So k plus 5 equals 0. K minus 2 equals 0. So we're going to subtract 5 from both sides. We're going to add 2 to both sides. So I get negative 5 and 2. Okay, let's do one more. Again, first step, make sure it's equal to 0. Do not forget that step. It'll mess up your factoring. So to make this equal to 0, I'm going to add 3 to both sides. So I get 6p squared plus 32p plus 10 there, equals 0. The second step is to see if I can divide a GCF out. So if I'm looking at this, I can divide everything in this problem by 2. So I get 3p squared plus 16p plus 5 equals 0. And then I need to go ahead and make my x. This time, since there's a number out front, I need to multiply. 3 times 5 is 15. The 16 goes in the bottom, so the two numbers that multiply to give me 15 and add up to 16 are 15 and 1. Okay, since that number's out front, we have to do AC split. So we have 3p squared plus 15p plus 1p plus 5 equals 0. We're going to go ahead and make two groups. In my first group, I can divide 3 and 15 both by 3, and then I have a p there. That leaves me with p plus 5. Second group, I can't divide by anything, so I'm going to put a 1 out front there. Okay, two groups matched, so we're in good shape. We're going to bring that p plus 5 out, and we have a 3p plus 1. And then we are going to go ahead and set each part equal to 0 and solve. So p plus 5 equals 0, 3p plus 1 equals 0. Not sure why that spot mode wasn't working. Okay, subtract 5 from both sides, and you get p equals negative 5. Subtract 1 from both sides. Turn this up here. We get 3p equals negative 1, and divide by 3, which we can't do, so we're going to leave it as a fraction, which is negative 1/3. So our two answers here are negative 5 and negative 1/3. Okay, try a couple problems like that, have them checked out, make sure you understand it. If you have any questions, let us know. Once you finish that, you can get some extra practice on these, and then take your quiz to make sure you understand it. Let us know if you need help. Have a great day.